Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome, everyone, to today's show on Earth Energy Forecast on this February 5th, 2019. I'm so glad that you decided to join us today. Thank you for listening, and to all of you that are listening later to the podcast on the archives, welcome, and thank you for taking the time to do that. I am so excited about today's show. Brian Hawley, an Anishinabe elder, will speak to us today about their Seven Fires prophecy, their creation story, beliefs, sacred sites, sweat lodge, and how we can connect and stay connected to Mother Earth. Brian is a pipe carrier, sweat lodge, water pour, vision quest leader, and a good friend of mine for almost 15 years now. Welcome to the show, Brian.
Hey, Joan. How you doing?
I'm well. How are you doing, Brian?
I'm doing great.
Thanks for joining me on today. Yes, it's always a wonderful day. Yes, whenever it's above freezing, it's a wonderful day here in the winter. So, yeah, it's a great day. Thanks for joining me. I was wondering if we could start today by telling everyone about the Anishinabe tribe, where they're located, and a little bit of the background.
The Anishinaabe people are an Algonquin people, an Algonquin cultural and language people, primarily made up of the Algonquin, the Ottawa, and the Ojibwe people, the Ojibwe people being the largest percentage of the people that constitute the Anishinaabe people. They are mostly woodland people from the Algonquin, of course, are from Quebec. They go from the East Coast all the way over to Minnesota at this point. The Algonquin people are primarily in Quebec and Ontario, as is the Ojibwe people are in Canada and the U.S. also. And the Ottawa people are primarily in the U.S. right now.
Thank you. So tell us a little bit about your spiritual beliefs. What's the basis, what's the heart of the Anishinaabe tribe?
I think that the heart of the Anishinaabe tribe is the heart of most Native First Nation and Native American people, and that is the interconnectedness of everything, the interrelationship of us as a people with our surroundings. And I think the difference, one of the big differences is that the main culture thinks about dominating the resources and the natural world. Not everybody, of course, and then the Native people, I think more of living in communion with that.
Yes. So living together in a right way on Mother Earth.
Right. That's correct.
Yeah.
That's a good way of putting it. The words that Minnow Bamatsawin means the good life, and that is living the right way. Also, the Red Road, as you've heard, I'm sure, which is trying to live a life in balance with Mother Nature and with your fellow human beings. Right living.
Yes.
tempting.
That's what we're all doing. All trying to do is, especially
Trying
now,
to do, yeah.
live in balance in these times of imbalance, of great imbalance. But balance really is a dynamic state.
Yeah.
Especially nowadays. It really is.
It is.
So,
yeah,
what about? Go ahead, Brian.
No, it's a never-ending quest. That's for sure.
Mhm. Mhm. What about the Anishinaabe creation story? What do they say on how this world was created, how we were created?
Well, okay, yeah, they, the interesting thing is they call Chimanidu, which is a great spirit, or the great mystery, which I find extremely interesting because great mystery means that we can't know everything. It doesn't mean that we don't keep questing for it, but I think it means that there's something out there that we keep looking for. The creator in the creation story, it's interesting, he created Mother Earth first, which is female energy. That was the first, and then everything else was created, and the last was man. And it said that he took 4 parts of Mother Earth and blew them into the sacred shell, which is the I'll talk about later, which is very important into our migration story. But from the union of those 4 sacred elements, man was created, and then he lowered man to the earth. So this creation story is different from, say, for the Hopi prophecies and their creation story, where they came up from the earth. We were lowered down, and what Anishinabe means is from whence lowered, the male of the species. And first man was known as Wananabuju, and when the Creator lowered him, he wandered the earth and named everything. His first job was to name the rivers, the trees, the mountains, and that stuff, and that's what he did originally. So that the creation story was, and of course it progresses in that he becomes very lonely because he's the only person there, and he gives the Creator gives him Mayan gun, which is the wolf, and the wolf again goes around the world with him, and then when he comes back, he realizes the wolf is not enough, and of course then we go to the female. He has a female, and they get married, and they have children, and they live a good life, and then there's villages across North America, Turtle Island, and what happens in many stories is that they start to fight. Humans start to fight. They start to become jealous of each other. They start to covet what other people want, and as many stories unfold, including the Bible, the Creator sends a flood, and everybody dies, and except for one man, that's original man. He's not, and he ends up on a log in the water, and he's very sad because everything's gone, and this is a purification story. It is told by many different cultures, and then eventually he realizes they want to start the earth again. So many of the animals that are resting on the log, there's some of the animals that had survived also. They all try to go down to the bottom, and the man tries to go down first, and he can't make it, and he comes back. What he wanted to do was grab some dirt, some of the mud that was down there, so that he could come back and maybe start earth again. And what happens is a couple of the other animals try it, and they same thing, no success. And then the muskrat says that he will try it, and everybody laughs at the muskrat. How are you going to do this? And he goes down. He's gone for a long time, and they figure for sure he drowned. And he comes back, and as he gets back to the log, he had drowned, but he makes it to the back, and they're all doing the what we call the traveling song, a morning song for him. And one of them notices that he has some dirt in his paw, and so they put the dirt on the back of the turtle, and the turtle says, "I will create North America, Turtle Island," and that's where Turtle Island comes from in our story. And again, it's populated, and that's how we came about to where we are now with our nations. That's the creation story.
That's beautiful. There's a couple things I want to ask you about during that story. First of all, you talked about the 4 sacred elements. I'm assuming that you're talking about earth, air, water, and fire. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
That's correct.
And then you said that the Anishinabe means it's being lowered. So I'm just wondering, does that tribe at all connect with star beings? Like, for example, the Hopi connect with the Kachina. Do you have any connections with other star beings? Do you talk about that in your tradition?
Not that I'm aware of, but that certainly doesn't mean I know all of what happens. I do know that we Wabana Nug, which means morning star, is revered. Also, the morning sun is revered. The stars are revered. But I really don't know of any cosmology that I might know about, that we would be connected with. I'm sure there is. I just don't know.
Okay. And it was interesting you talked about this flood and that all died except for one. It's interesting to think about what the Bible says and Noah and the flood there, that I wonder if there's any correlation with those stories. Was there anything else that was told about the floods, that one large flood?
No, it just said that the Creator realized that there needed to be a purification. Yeah, as you and I have talked about many times, there needed to be a purification, and that's what happened.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm going to talk on future shows about this in a more scientific way, and from what I've been following in the latest research that we have about going through these times of purification, as the indigenous have called them. The Hopi calls it this is the great time of purification. And as a matter of fact, a lot of these scientists now are seeing that the petroglyphs that, and I've seen many of them in at Chaco Canyon or in Arizona, are really depicting what the sun may do, going what's called micronova. And when the sun goes through these cyclical events, then you get great earth changes. And I'm going to talk about that on a future show. I just find that all of this is starting to, kind of click in, with everything that I have studied and learned when I was out in the Southwest, and from what I'm studying right now in the latest science about this.
You'd have to think there's some correlation. That's for sure.
Well, we're certainly seeing the changes in our weather patterns. No one can deny that the weather is getting more extreme. We just had a huge cold spell here in the U.S., and then this huge warm up, and in upstate New York we set a warm record for the warmest day just yesterday. So these huge temperature swings, and then you get these huge storms, and later on the end of the show I'll talk a little bit about, we have time, about some of the earth changes that are happening. And we know that we're having a lot more large earthquakes and certainly a lot more volcanic activity this year. So, and the sun, I'm going to talk about that at a future show too, how the sun really impacts the weather here on Earth. And is there any tradition that speaks to, some indigenous call it father-son? Do you have anything that, that your tradition talks about regarding the sun, Brian?
Well, many are normally in the past, it's not an Anishinaabe people. It's not a tradition to do the sun dance, although it is now more and more Anishinaabe people are doing the sun dance. It's the Lakota people. They do the sun dance. And a lot of the other plain tribes do the sun dance. It's a large event. I've gone to it I've not danced, but I've gone to it to support my friends that do dance, and obviously they are paying homage to the sun. I mean, that's what it means. They dance in the sun, and what they're doing is for many of them, it's a sacrifice. It might be a sacrifice for a child of theirs that has cancer. It may be a sacrifice for somebody, for any hardship that somebody else is doing. But primarily it is recognizing the power of the sun and just recognizing it, revering it, and by dancing. And so, yeah, they do recognize the strength of the sun, and they do recognize that it is significant. It's called, in the Ojibwe language, it's called Gisis. That means sun. Yeah, it's very important, extremely important.
So let's shift gears just a little bit. I know you touched on this sacred shell. I want to hear more about that. I think you're going to talk about that in the Seven Fires prophecy. Is that true?
That's correct. And I'll talk about that next. And what that was approximately, our tradition is oral. And the best you can hear is that 500 years ago, 7 prophets came to the Anishinaabe people. And when they were living on and the Atlantic, and gave them the 7 fires. The 7 prophets gave eras of what would happen for the next 500 years, and it could take forever to talk about this, but the main thing was that they told them that they needed to be. The prophet said that you need to make a migration from the East Coast to the land where food grows upon the water. And that was the stopping place, the last stopping place. Now, obviously, Anishinaabe people have moved from there, but that was in Madeline Island, which is Madulan Island, I'm sorry. And that was in Ontario and Minnesota, and that's where the wild rice grows, and which is a sacred food for the Anishinaabe people right now. It has been a sacred food. And they still cultivate it the way they've cultivated it for hundreds of years, with a canoe and beating the bushes with an oar or stick, and then the rice comes into your boat. But what happened was they told them that they needed to leave. The prophet said that they needed to leave because there would be a light-skinned race that would be coming to the East Coast, and they didn't know, and they said that you need to move. And they ended up with different stopping places. And the first stopping place, as the people moved, a lot of people, things were good, and a lot of people didn't pay attention to what the prophets told them. And the Abenaki people, our cousins on the East Coast, I think suffered the most because they stayed behind. And a lot of the natives on the original people that were on the East Coast, they got decimated. They got decimated by weapons they had never seen, and they got decimated by diseases. And so the first stopping place was, and they told them to follow the Migas shell, which is what you're talking about, which is a sacred shell to us. And they said, follow that shell and follow the Medewan Lodge, which is the Grand Medicine Society. That is making a comeback right now. It's a lodge where the elders teach people the old ways, some of the medicines, and how to live a good life, as we talked earlier. So they stopped at the first stopping off point. I think most people would think came down to St. Lawrence, which is interesting because you and I live in this area. They came down to St. Lawrence, and the first stopping place was Montreal. And then those people went up the Ottawa River, and I think that's the Algonquin people, which right now there's only, I think, 11,000 Algonquin people left.
Wow.
And then and then the next stop was Niagara Falls, which is quite interesting. Mm-hmm. And then there was like other stops, and then they ended up the last stop. I told you that they were Sault Ste. Marie, and all along the Great Lakes, which is why the Great Lakes are sacred to them.
Mm-hmm.
You and I are going to talk about sacred places, but they're sacred. And these prophecies, each prophet was an error that happened. It was a time frame, and they talked about following the old medicine ways and not getting away from that, and there was and said that they would get away from that, and they did, and it talked about that there would be a lot of the culture would be decimated, and people were thinking a lot of that has to do with the government coming and taking children away to boarding schools. And so a lot of the language was lost, and a lot of the culture was lost for a number of reasons. And I don't want to get into the political or militarization. We all know about that. But they told about many errors that would happen, and they most of them they've all come true. But the last prophet, they said, was a younger man, the seventh one, and he said that they said he was a little wild-eyed in his eyes, and that he said that there will become a time where you'll know you're at the seventh fire, where the fish is not the fire grows on the water, and the fish are not good to eat. And, of course, that's where we are now. Remember, the Cuyahoga River caught on fire in the Cleveland area back in, I think, in the 60s or 70s. And then, of course, you and I live in the beautiful Finger Lakes and Great Lakes area, and we can only eat one fish a month because of the pollution. So much of that has come true. And then what they said is and many of the elders at this point think we're at that seventh fire. Which so
means what does that mean? Yeah.
The seventh fire means that we're in a fork in the road, and there's two roads to take, and the one road is what they called scorched, and the other road is still green, and the most of the thought of the elders and the learned people think that if you follow the scorched way, that is the way. And we're talking about the white man now, the light-skinned race. Whether they will follow which road, it determines what's going to happen with our planet. And if they follow the scorched road, which most people think means the road of headlong technology, without any thought of the consequences, then we're in really bad straits. If they follow the green path, which is a path of spirituality, a slower, if you will, path, with thinking of the consequences of your actions, not just not headlong rising to create something, then that's the way that will light the eighth fire, which is a fire of brotherhood and sisterhood and peace and love. And most people think that's where we are right now. We are at a crossroads.
Yeah. I just talked about the Hopi prophecy last week, and it's very similar in that way, because at Prophecy Rock, it comes to there's two roads, and you can follow the Hopi way, or you can follow the indigenous way, or for your tradition, the green road, or you could take the Bahama road that the Hopi would call, the white man's road, or the lighter skin, and go this way. And they showed that road would end. but their road would continue. And so it's very similar. It's really interesting, and I do believe we're at that crossroads, and I think everyone would agree, to see what's happening right now. And I will have an astrologer come on, probably more than one. And I'll talk about the astrology a little bit more too. But even the astrology of this time says that we're at this great change that's going to happen. And it also makes me think about Nostradamus when he predicted this 1,000 years of peace. So we really are there. Which one are we going to choose? And I find it very interesting because, with him or any prophet, the question comes up, what will you choose? Even that's like the Bible code that was there. That was there in the Bible code. What will you choose? And that will determine our future.
There's certainly a lot of similarities. One would have to give it credence, I would think,
Yes. And, like I said, when you look at all these petroglyphs and what they were really, I think, depicting, because I'm like, why are they're putting the creation spiral? Or what is this? Or maybe that looks like an extraterrestrial or whatever. But, actually, when you look at what might happen to the sun if it micronovas, it looks very similar. It's really compelling to see this. And as I talk about in my second book, Hardwired to Heaven, we are all going through this ascension phase. And as more and more of this light comes in, that's how we become enlightened. That's how we go through this raising of our frequencies. Was there any talk about what happens to us, to the humans on this earth at this time? If we choose that road, do we change too?
If we choose the
green road,
the scorched road, you mean the green?
Yeah. If we choose the green road.
It says that we have brotherhood, sisterhood, peace, and love. So, interesting enough, it doesn't say what happens if we follow the other one. I think they think that that's self-evident. If we keep,
like the Hopi, it ends. It ends.
The eighth fire doesn't light. So
right.
That's
they don't
it.
talk about a ninth fire after that. Yeah.
No. And then it says all four. Yeah, it says all four races of man will live together in peace and harmony.
And what just struck me, what just came to me right now, is that they use the term fire. They call it a fire, and we can look at fire in a lot of different ways. Certainly it's purification. Fire does purify, but you can think about the sun and the fire in the sun. You think about, well, where does the fire element come from? Yes, we can make fire here, but we can also think about Father Sky, Father Sun here. I just find that interesting. Anything to add on that, Brian?
Fire. It's interesting you said that because I forgot to talk about that. But for that, all of that period of, according to the prophecy, all of that period from the time they made the migration, which was years and years and years, hundreds of years, there was always a sacred fire lit. There was people who were responsible for keeping the fire going all of the time. So they understood the significance. It's interesting you brought that. They understood the significance of the fire. Which is very important to us in our purification lodge, and our other ceremonies. The fire.
And it's just so interesting because we can go a little bit more on this symbolism here too. And what I think about is keep the home fires burning, and what that means to us. And when I start to think about that, it really comes to the core, to the heart. What really matters to us. Keep the home fires burning, or keep the fire going in your heart. And again. We are the microcosm of the macrocosm. We do have a mini sun within our hearts, I believe. I wrote about too in Hardwired to Heaven. So I find this quite interesting. Just overlapping this tradition, this ancient tradition, with what, we're, because my book does blend science and spirituality of what we're really waking up to now. So it's really beautiful. And that's the key part of this, that we are waking up, because if we weren't waking up, then we wouldn't have the choice of the green road, because we wouldn't even know that it existed.
Yeah, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
No, exactly, Brian.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you talked about following the old medicine ways. What does that mean?
Well, there's the Medewan Lodge, which is the Grand Medicine Society. It's coming back. It's been going, but it seems to be getting stronger, and it's talking about what you know as a sweat lodge, what I call a purification lodge, and it's the Bawajigawan, which is the Vision Quest, it's the Sundance, it's the naming ceremonies, which our naming ceremonies, is when a baby is born, an elder or a person of some prominence will come in and name the child. Well, that naming ceremony comes back from when I told you that the original man wandered the earth and the Creator told him to name everything, the plants and the water. That's where that naming ceremony comes from. So that all ties in together. But so it's still doing like the ceremonies that have been going on for thousands of years. Still doing those. That if they weren't important and they weren't real, we still wouldn't be doing them, I don't think.
And just from what I know about indigenous peoples, and from my time in Arizona and even in Akiva, and putting my science background and some of the experiences I had, I really, in talking to, I think he may have been Lakota, and we did some Benny LeBeau, we did some acupuncture for the earth in talking with him, that a lot of the indigenous know about really scientific principles and have seen all of this and know this, that we're just now discovering, which is quite interesting. And there is a reason, and I'm sure that, the Western society, I should not say man, but Western society will wake up to it one day and see the proof behind it, the science behind it of why you do what you do. And, the naming ceremony, what's in a name, that is so important. Yeah. And I think we've lost the importance of these things, because once you have the name of something, you have power over it.
Yeah.
And when we speak what we're doing, and even, now we know, it's even on Facebook, people share all this about smudging, about using sage. Why do we use sage? Well, it does clear the negative energy. It does clear the house of, it could be antibacterial and a lot of other, properties. So I think that for people to think, in the old thought about the indigenous, that when Columbus came over and then the rest of Europe came over, and we have to get rid of the heathens, and if they weren't part of the Christian, Catholic, or whatever Christian churches, that's it. If we still stay with that thought, we'll just think they don't know what they're doing. But if we sit and we live in right relationship with all peoples, no matter what tribe they are, whether it's, over in Africa or the Aboriginals in Australia, no matter where you are on this earth, you will learn so much wisdom, because they were tapped in to this collective consciousness. They were tapped into the cosmic mind. And if we tap into that, we can download anything we want.
It's kind of interesting that that we that there was such a big movement to eradicate a lot of culture and traditions that were used by original people. Why was that such a threat? I mean, that's a question. Why was that such a threat? I'll throw an interesting thing out. I do lodge, and when I tell, and I have a lot of young people that come into lodge, and when I tell them that it was illegal until 1978 in the United States of America to have ceremony, i.e. Sweat Lodge, Vision Quest, or Sundance, they're blown away. They can't believe it. Until 1978, it was illegal. You could be arrested for having a ceremony.
Yeah.
Why?
And thank goodness times are changing. Why? Yeah, of course. That's a whole other show, Brian. We can go into that.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Well, part of it is control, because part of it was ignorance, I'm sure, and part of it was about control.
Right.
And we can no longer claim ignorance, especially with the advent of the internet, and the control is starting to crumble. I'm going to talk about this, and other astrologers will, about Pluto and coming conjunct with Saturn and Capricorn. These old structures are going, and a lot of that is control structures. So it all intermeshes. From no matter how you look at it, everything points to the same place of where we're going. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, it is quite interesting. It's beautiful.
Yeah. So what about your sacred sites? You talked about the Great Lakes as being sacred. What else do the Anishinaabe consider to be sacred here on Earth?
Well, there's Medulin Island that I was telling you about, Pipestone, Minnesota, where they get the stone to make the bowl of your pipes, is a sacred spot. And of course the lakes, and I would think even the St. Lawrence, although I've never seen that, I kind of think that, you and I have both traveled out west together, and I was thinking about this before I came on. I knew we were going to talk about this. What makes a sacred site? Is it because people have prayed there for thousands of years, or is it because of the energy? And I thought about that for the last day, and I'm thinking probably it's a combination of both.
Right.
And,
I agree. Yeah.
I think it's a combination. Maybe the energy is drawn to people there to do that praying for thousands of years. Bear Butte, for instance, and South Dakota. I went to Bear Butte several years ago, and that's where many Plains tribes people come, and they do their vision quest there, and they you'll see prayer ties. It was beautiful. It was so heartwarming. I mean, it made you want to cry walking from the base to the top of Bear Butte, and to see all of those prayer ties, and that people took the time to say a prayer for somebody and then tie it there. That is a consciousness that exceeds themselves. They thinking of somebody else, or was quite wonderful. And as you know, I've driven across New Mexico and look at mesas and say, "Holy cow, that is so powerful."
Yes.
And
yes, I've had that experience
just
too. Yes.
Yeah, and then Chaco Canyon and Mount Taylor, Mount Humphrey, all of those, and Sedona. I'll never forget. I had my niece in the back in my car one day, and she had never been to Sedona. And we were driving, that area as well as I do, and we were driving down the road, and as we came around the corner is when you first see those red rocks. And I looked in the back seat, and tears coming down her eyes.
Yeah.
She said, I've never witnessed anything like that.
Yeah.
And And that's kind of how I feel when I go to the Grand Canyon. Oh my goodness gracious, what a beautiful spot. Obviously now I think the problem, it's not a problem, but it certainly is a challenge, is how do we manage those sites with the aggression of some of the companies that need it, that they think they get those natural resources. How do you manage that? How do you balance? We talk about living in balance. Well, somewhere in there,
right,
we got to find a common ground. I don't know. I think that's a challenge.
Unfortunately,
that certainly is a challenge.
Unfortunately for a lot of people, they left Mother Earth out of the equation.
Exactly.
And exactly. We are her children, and as you know, and she is a living being. All planets are. All planets have consciousness. Everything has consciousness. If there's energy, there's consciousness. And we need to think about her, and as many indigenous peoples do, 7 generations out. And
exactly.
I was very disheartened when I saw that in this country they're thinking of doing fracking close to Chaco Canyon and other sacred sites. It just is. It's for me incomprehensible. And it goes to my heart because I do have this beautiful connection to Mother Earth, and before we end today, and I know I want to get to talking about that, but I have this connection to the Mother. We all do, because our heart's electromagnetic field is connected to her magnetic field. We are interconnected. We're living in this sea of interconnectivity, and I think about Spider Woman in Spider Rock, Northern Arizona. And that story, and how she would weave this web, and how we're all connected to this web, and we call it the web of being on the web. We actually call it that. But the original and the web that will always continue is what resonates from our hearts. That is the connection.
It's how what I originally said when we started this is that we have to live in communion, not in domination.
Mm-hmm.
We've got to commune. We got to commune with the earth. Got to respect it.
Mm-hmm.
Got to think 7 generations.
Yeah,
7 times
in
7,
all our relations.
Yeah, in all our relations, exactly. Yep.
Yeah, everything is related. We all are related, whether it's a frog or a bird or a horse or a human. We're all related.
Yeah.
We're all related.
Yep.
And
all
we're all,
spirit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. So with our remaining time, we have about 15 minutes left or so. Can you tell us a little bit more about the Sweat Lodge that you hold? Because I'm sure a lot of listeners know about sweat lodges, but maybe some don't. And so that you can, tell the purpose of the lodge and what you do.
The lodge is, and I'm going to talk. Each there's many different lodges, but most of them are, and there's a difference. And mine will be from the Anishinabe tradition, but most of them recognize, just as you've just got done talking, the interconnectedness of everything. Our lodge, the lodge that I have, faces east. The door faces east that you enter to come into the lodge, and that is in deference to the morning sun. The newness of the day, the newness of life, hoping that your experience will help you become reborn, which sounds really Christian. But what the lodge itself, the physical makeup of the lodge is willows or other saplings that are supple enough that you can pull them over and you tie them to make a dome-shaped structure. In the past, they were they were covered with animal skins, but primarily now we do blankets and canvas. In our tradition, as I said, and then you have a fire, and you have a firekeeper. Again, the importance of the firekeeper. The person who starts that fire in our tradition is every bit as important as the person who pours the water. That firekeeper, is the responsibility of them is to do the fire, do it with respect. You take what we call grandfathers, which are stones, and you heat those. You heat them, and the fire tender watches over that, nurses it, gets those stones nice and hot, keeps the fire going. If anybody is new to the lodge, they tell them about what they're doing. And behind the fire itself, we have a crescent shape, and on that altar, you put things that are important to you, things of power, an eagle feather, a bracelet, whatever. And then that's on the east side of the fire, and then from the fire to the lodge itself is what we call the fire line, the spirit line, and that spirit line we cover with cedar. Again, one of the 4 major herbs, sacred herbs, and cedar is Kishiken-dug in Ojibwe, and you don't cross that fire line. The only person who can cross the fire line is the firekeeper and or the water pour until we go inside the lodge. And so usually what I recommend to people when we're sitting outside the lodge is that they take some asema, which is tobacco, Ojibwe word for tobacco, which is another one of the sacred herbs. Place it in the fire with your intentions of what you would like to get out of the lodge. And the lodge, purification lodge or sweat lodge, is primarily for prayer, amplification. And when I say purification, I mean your body. You'll sweat toxins out, purifying your spirit and your mind. And since I've been doing it, most people tell you prayer and purification. To me, I have seen so many healings happen in lodge, and I say healing also. But what we do is, to become a water pour lodge leader, you have to somebody has to recognize that you have that ability, and you also have to know the songs in the traditional language. So when we go into the lodge, we sing songs to all 4 directions in the Ojibwe language. I do, to the Ojibwe language, and what we're doing is asking for the spirits of those 4 directions to come in. And each direction has a significance, which is sacred, and I really don't want to talk about that right now unless you were in lodge. But you go into the lodge and you sing sacred songs, and you pray, and you pray for. Some lodge leaders only want you to pray for other people. I think you should pray for yourself, because if you don't have yourself right, you're not going to be getting anybody else right by praying for them. So you bring when the grandfathers, the stones are heated up, the firekeeper brings them in and places them in the pit in the middle of the lodge, and that pit is and they do it by placing them in the 4 directions first, and then they scatter them without. But the 4 directions are go east, south, west, and north, and then and there's a person in the lodge that is designated by the water pourer to put cedar on each grandfather as it's brought in and placed in and then those are put in there, and then let me back up again. And then before the people that are going to be participants in the lodge come in, they're smudged.
Mm-hmm.
I brought this up earlier. They're smudged primarily with cedar or sage, and that is to get rid of any negative energy, or to make yourself more conducive to accepting any spirits or any messages that may come to you while you're in the lodge. So then they come in the lodge and they come in counter clockwise and sit in the lodge, and then we see in some tradition the water pours or the firekeeper stays outside, and other ones they come in. I have my firekeeper come inside, and then you close the door, and it becomes very warm, as you know. You've been there, Joan, and then the water is brought in. The sacred water is brought in, and when that water is placed on top of those sacred stones, that is the breath of the Creator. And it purifies your body. It purifies those toxins in your body. And it also helps carry your messages to the Creator, your prayers. And in that lodge, it may last from pretty much what Spirit tells you to do. It may last from an hour to, I've been in lodges that last 4 hours. And there's 4 doors. Each door, again, is the time is kind of conducive what Spirit tells the water pour. And you open the door after the first round, what they call a round, and we've done prayers and we've sung songs, and then you open the door and you get some breath of the air from outside. You get some relief from the heat. Nobody has to stay inside. If they want to come out, they say, all my relations, again, we're all related, all my relations, and you go out. It's not a contest to see how strong you are. And then we do that for 4 rounds. And the 4 rounds are representing the 4 directions, of course. It's very powerful, and in itself, I said that we purify ourselves before we go in by smudging, and in addition to that, the lodge itself, the purification lodge or the sweat lodge, is also a purification for other ceremonies. So if you're going to go out on a vision quest, for instance, if you're going to go out on a vision quest, then you go into the sweat lodge first, and you're being purified before you go out onto out to the vision quest. And the same thing with sun dances. In a sun dance, you do a number of every day. You do a number of sweat lodges before you go out. You're purified so you can go out and do your sun dance. So pretty much it's a purification lodge with prayers and prayers and purification and healing is a byproduct of being in there.
Right. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing all of that, Brian. So we've only got maybe about a little over 5 minutes left. I'm wondering, in this short period of time, can you give us some ways of how we can connect to Mother Earth and stay connected to her?
I don't have a formula for that. I know for me, when you go into the lodge, you and that was another thing I forgot to tell you. I'm sorry. Before you go into the lodge, the door is low, so you're bending. You're getting down on your knees, and you're giving respect to the mother. You're feeling the mother below you as you go in. And when you get inside, the pit represents the womb of Mother Earth.
Right.
So when you've gone through that process, and you're coming back out, you're on your knees again, and thought is that you've been reborn. You've been reborn in the Mother Earth. So, to me, that is one way. That's, from an indigenous standpoint, that's to be in a lodge on the Mother is very important. To do a vision quest, Mawajagewin, you are on the Mother for 1 to 4 days by yourself.
By yourself, right?
Out there, by yourself.
Yes.
No matter, and with the stars above you, and that's where you are, and you're in a. So again, you're connected. You're connected to the Mother. Sundance, you're dancing on the Mother. You actually, when you're in the arbor, you have your shoes off so you can feel the mother. I think for me, the closest way to connect is to walk. I mean, I love to walk the trails, climb the mountains. I mean, and then you see and feel the beauty about you. I say that's how you connect. You connect we connect through ceremony, and everybody has as much ceremony as they want because we can walk on the mother.
Right. Yeah, I think it's important for people to understand that it's okay to do ceremony in your own way. To go out and take a walk in nature. Many times I will do that, and then I will say, okay, I'm going to do ceremony for whatever it is for myself. And then, whether I bring tobacco or whether I bring gemstones or whatever it is or whatever I find along the trail, I encourage people to do their own ceremonies. It's very powerful. And I talk about it in my first book, In the Key of Life, An Activational Journey to the Soul, the ceremony that I did when I arrived, shortly after I arrived in Sedona, where I did a death and rebirth ceremony and for myself. And I took, a piece of wood. It was probably an old piece of, I don't know. I'm not sure what it was. But I etched things in there and I put things on there. And I made this declaration that the old is gone, and I threw it out into the arroyo, and then I made my rebirth stick, as I called it. And I added things on there to signify the rebirth, the renewal of who I am. So I encourage people to do this, and to connect to the mother and to include her in your ceremonies. I think that's very, very important, very powerful.
Well,
we got a couple minutes left.
Remember you and I did with some friends, did the ceremony of putting tobacco or whatever was important to us in the water.
Yes.
Remember we did that? Yeah. I mean, that was another way of connecting. We did that. We did that to show our respect for the water.
Yeah.
So
we did respect for the water as a symbol of emotions. When we did that emotional energy grid that we did the ceremony for last year, I think it was, when we created that. So water is symbolic of emotions and how they flow, and water carries. Water is important for life. We can't live without water. Water is ubiquitous. It's interesting when you do the science and you check around that there's water on black holes and in places you never think. So. Yeah, we need water. We've got a little over a minute left, Brian. Anything else you want to share with us before we end today?
No, I would just, I would just think that if you're going to do ceremony, however you do it, just do it in a respectful way and respect other people's traditions and the way that they do things. And just, most of those people think that they're doing it in a good way and pray for them that they do it in a good way. Just be respectful of one another and one another and all of our relations. Yep. All of our relations.
Yes, very good. Well, Brian, this has been great. I really enjoyed this show. I'm so grateful that you came on today, and maybe we can do this again. But we're almost
done. Thanks for having me, Joe. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you again, Brian. And thank you all for listening to Earth Energy Forecast. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Take care.